All right, so we're going to start this next session. We have Niklas Odelholm joining us from Softube, and I'm getting the nod that I got the name closer. Thank you, sir. I've had the pleasure of knowing Niklas for longer than I remember, but it will certainly date us. It's got to be 20 years ago now. No, it's probably something between 15 and 20 years. While Niklas was still in university, I believe, and doing some really crazy guitar algorithmic stuff, or maybe, I don't know. But I don't know where it began, let's just say. But I do remember a music messa 15 to 20 years ago being invited out to a hotel that was probably a half-hour cab ride and meeting the Softube folks there. That's, I remember how the journey starts. But it's a lovely journey indeed. We're here to talk with Niklas and do a lovely kind of an open Q&A. The thinking here is we started off with an agenda of maybe talking about algorithmic design because that's my passion and something that got me into my interest for Softube. But Niklas reminded me that maybe we'll take a step further out, maybe looking at how Softube got started in the industry itself and take it, kind of meander through that and kind of talk through where Softube started and where it's going to today. And then it's meant to be really open Q&A form. So I would say just maybe wave your hand and we'll get the mic to you and just let's ask Niklas some good questions. Niklas, I'm going to hand it over to you. Why don't you do your intro and we can then kick into the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you. Niklas Odelholm is my name, and right now I'm Vice President of Products at Softube. But I think I've had pretty much every role there is in this company because we started small and then you have to do everything from wining and dining with Bobby when he was at DigiDesign 15 to 20 years ago. So basically we started 15, 20 years ago and my role has been ever shifting ever since, but my passion for products and algorithms is probably what made me stay in this industry. Take it away, Bobby.
Okay, so why don't you give me an idea? When did Softube start? What was the year? And then how many people was it? And kind of like, was it all engineering students, or did it have marketing back then, or anything? Or
No, it was only engineering. It was in 2003. We made some good tech at the university and felt that this is something that we, could use. Other companies can use in their products, like DigiDesign or Marshall or whatever business in the audio industry there was. So basically what we did was try to make a proof of concept of that tech, go to the trade shows and basically meet everyone, take you to that hotel room, which was probably half an hour cab ride away, but it was a 5-minute walk.
Oh. Ouch.
And yes, just, showcasing the tech and see if it could fit a product somewhere.
Do you want to tell us what that tech was? What was that first algorithm that kicked you off?
It was emulation of tube amps, guitar amps. We started with a Marshall amp and tried to dissect that really in detail to find something that was better than the products that were out there, and also something that would fit into the chips that were used for audio production back then.
I remember the algorithm well. I remember, Niklas, the part that blew me away was that you had properly emulated the feedback that was occurring in the amp. And I remember I just played with feedback for hours. And there's another story to tell about how that ended up in one of my favorite pedals from Fender. And it actually busted on me. And then I realized that the price had gone up because you stopped making this lovely feedback pedal. I think they could go for about like 900 US. I think it's called the Runaway or Freeway or something like this. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Lovely green pedal. It's just gorgeous. Yeah. So the question I have then is, so very smart students coming up with amazing algorithms to emulate amps. So how the heck does that work? Without a marketing or biz dev person, how do you break into the MI business from that? What was that first step?
The first trade shows, really. The first trade show, we had a CD with sound examples and a brochure. We started at the top of one aisle in the probably the sort of computer recording of Pro Audio Poole, and then said, "Hello, my name is, we're from Softube. Are you interested in this?" And no one was really. But we sort of continued doing this, and we made sure to, get to know everyone and have, a couple of beers in the bar. So next year it's like, oh, I know those guys. They're from Softube. And then that year we had a prototype, sort of DSP prototype, a small box. And eventually, we started to get to know everyone in the industry and managed to convince some of them to, place the bet on us. And one of the first companies that did that was Marshall, which was kind of fun because Marshall.
I'm realizing, Niklas, that it was really then the licensing tech coming first, and then really Softube as Softube products was much later then.
Yeah, because we had no clue on how to make a product. We knew how to make algorithms, not products.
It seems like the harder way to do it, in some ways, to try to get someone as big as Marshall, to license your first algorithm, versus putting out maybe a plugin or sort of app of some sort. But I mean, it looks like you hit success with Marshall right away. So that's fascinating.
I mean, it was a long journey, and one thing to remember is that the plugin market in 2003 wasn't what it was today. There was almost nothing to be had from that market. It was, with the exception for maybe Massive Pack that DigiDesign were selling.
That would have been Line 6, I believe, right? That was the Line 6 amplifier. I think that was the only thing really out at the time. SansAmp, with SansAmp as well. I think there was a Bomb Factory SansAmp in 1999. So yes, you're right. There was not a lot of guitar sims available at the time.
And also everyone in the industry told us to stay away from plugins.
I hope I didn't say that. Did I say this? No.
I can't remember.
Ouch. Okay. So let's see. So you end up licensing to Marshall. Then when do you make the decision to start the plugin business? In other words, I know you as a plugin company, but I think many folks maybe know you as a plugin company, not a licensing company.
Yeah, we did a bunch of plugins for other companies like TC Electronic, Brainworks, and then we made a bunch of TDM ports, 56K ports for Flux, and we did plugins for Abbey Road, so forth. And I think there was during that journey when we started to actually doing plugins, see the sales numbers, see what it takes to actually do this and what kind of resources we needed to have, that we started to think that we should probably try it ourselves. And also we had pretty much a finished plugin that was supposed to be licensed to another company, and they backed out. So we had this product and nowhere to take it. So like, heck, let's release it ourselves. And the thing was, there were no automatic e-commerce services, easy way to set up a credit card thing. So a lot of that back-end work was probably harder than making the actual plugin.
This is news to me, so I didn't realize you had so much licensing going on before that first product. Maybe share with us, what were some of those initial challenges selling that very first plugin, if you can recall back then? Like, if you had some advice to give? I think this is one I'm certainly curious about. We have a lot of new plugins coming out, new developers, and it's always difficult to understand what's the best way to come out and launch a product.
I think, first of all, the business has changed. Now you probably need to reach masses a lot faster than we had to do. We could sell a quite expensive plugin to a few customers instead of having a cheaper plugin to a lot of customers. But basically what we did was ask everyone we knew for help. I wanted to know how to get into magazines with this plugin, so I called like Paul White and Sound and said, "Hey, I'm Niklas from Sweden. We'd like to get featured. How do we do that?" And everyone is super nice, especially if you're young and friendly. Everyone is super nice. They tell you what to do and how you go about it. Same thing with testers or dealers. Basically went to dealers, and because we were selling plugins through dealers, asking them, how do you want us to do this? What is the preferred way that you want to make business with us? And then we just learned and tried to find out everything. But I mean, it was difficult. If we didn't have the licensing thing in the back, we wouldn't have been able to afford putting out plugins and supporting them for as long time as it took for things to actually take off.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that we are talking, I mean, almost 20 years ago. Yeah, it is different. And actually, I've got a great question about 20 years, but before I go there and maybe shift gears, I was going to take it more into the direction of technology and industry trends, but I'm curious in the room and online, please, any questions around this initial stages of kind of algorithm development, plugin development, and launching a plugin, if there's any, or anything related to that? I got one in the room, Niklas, so I'm going to pass the mic up.
Hey, thanks. How did you go about the process of moving things between 56K and other platforms without losing the sort of soul or intent of your algorithms?
Oh, that's a very good question. We spent, since we came from sort of a research academia thing, we spent a lot of time on two back-end components. One was the way we build the models, make the mathematical representation of the piece of gear they want to do. And the other part was basically taking that mathematical representation and auto-generating code. And since we always had these chips in mind when we started, we made sure that everything we did, even if sometimes it's quite cumbersome to take something and port it to a 24-bit fixed-point platform, but the way the code generation worked, we could make sure that every step made the right decision, that it needed double precision here, or that it needs to use a table instead of some mathematical operation in that stage, and so forth. And then all along the code, comparing and see what happens. And in some cases, we had some products, for instance, early on a metal amp room, which we never released on TDM because we could never get it to sound the same. So we actually just did not do it because of too much gain, too much distortion, too fragile filters for it to even work. We just skipped that product on 56K. Did it answer?
Yeah, I think that suffices a good answer. We could keep prodding. I recommend we keep pushing Niklas to his extreme. Any other questions in the room before we move on to a different topic? Okay, nothing on the online QA, but if you have a question online, just type it into the Q&A window and we can see it here, and Niklas as well. Niklas, so I just was thinking the 20-year mark, going back, what else was different, maybe thinking back 20 years ago in the algorithm design, but now take us to where you're going in those last 20 years, where Softube is going. A lot has changed in the audio world, especially when it relates to algorithms and effects and even the way we create these effects and model them. I'm just curious, what is exciting, new, different in that journey of Softube? Would love to know if there was something unique that happened along the way that changed how you thought about modeling or creating products. I know we could probably talk hours on this one topic.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to not answer your question because I think that the biggest change during these 20 years is the democratization of music making. When we started, you basically still needed to have a studio or really expensive gear to mix music, and mixing in the box required, hardware from like a Pro Tools hardware or something else. While now it's possible to make music, make a hit record on your laptop, and I think that's the biggest difference how the music industry has, grown. where it's not really about the fancy tools anymore. It's about the creativity, the songwriting, and all that. Which also means that the business has changed. There's really no point in selling super expensive software, because you have so many people you want to sell it to. You have so many customers that you would love for, you want them to use your gear to make their music. I think that is the biggest change. But when it comes to algorithms, of course, we have more processing power now. That's a big change.
Right. Well, that's the only thing that's changed in 20 years. It's faster. Good. Okay. Well, no, of course. I'm curious, you mentioned the democratization. Aside from obviously price, making plugins much more accessible, what other things does Softube take into consideration with making products, as the entire world of DAWs and tools have been democratized, and you can now get your bedroom system up and running for under probably $500. Does that change how you create products and launch products?
Yeah. It's. I think that 20 years ago you could have very specific specialists in different areas, and they needed different tools. Now everyone is more of a generalist, while they specialize in one area, which means that if you're making a synth product, for instance, if you make that product for a specialist, then you need certain you need to make sure that everything is correct, that the labels are exactly how that synth expert would like them to be. While if you're making a synth product for a general producer that doesn't really care about the history of 80s synths, then you go about it different way, because they're not experts in that area. So I think that we have a very successful product called Tape, which is basically, we spent so much time making that algorithm and had all the different internal parameters, but in the end we just basically added an amount knob and then 3 different tape types, because that's how much energy our customers want to spend on that detail. So you change the products depending on basically how much time the customer have, the user have.
Any questions in the room on this direction we're taking now in sort of last 20 years? No? How about the Softube team? No? Well, some comments here on the democratization. I guess I always thought of Softube plugins being very easy to use, even from the early days of TDM. Thinking back to the feedback simulator and such, they were actually already taking an approach, in my opinion, that it just had the right number of knobs, or we're doing maybe some sort of like hardware emulation that already made it very accessible in the world of where plugins, say from TC and others, just was a sea of knobs. So I would say it was really just a refreshing welcome. And also you had gone for photorealism in the plugins very early on too, which was kind of a continuation where, say, like Line 6 started with their kind of amp kind of looking sims. And that was also very refreshing.
Yeah, it's the whole skeuomorphism thing is always debated. One upside of that is that if you get the feeling that the thing is a hardware, then you know that there aren't any hidden tabs or deep menus. Also, you always know that, well, if there's an output volume knob, it's probably in the lower right corner. So by just showing the user hardware looking thing, they will have an easier time accepting the product and what it does. So I think that right now, when so many users are using plugins, their time is very important. They need to understand what they're looking at immediately. Otherwise, they won't use it.
Lost quick. Here, I'll take a shift here because I think this will interest folks in the room. When you think of the algorithms and products left to do for the Softube roadmap and other things, like, do you ever think that everything possible has already been done in the world of plugins and algorithms? Or do you want to maybe give us some ideas of what you think hasn't been done or could be interesting in the world of like innovative audio algorithms? I don't know if this could be a direction you've thought of, but I'm sure you have when you're thinking about what else to make. Do you feel that there's an area that just hasn't been explored as much?
I think when it comes to workflow, there are tons of things to do. How do you go from what you hear in your head to actually doing it? And EQ, compressor, distortion might not be the perfect way of doing that. And there are new exciting products coming out that do something different or take it in a different direction. But I have a sort of strong conviction that a good sounding algorithm is also mathematically beautiful in some sense. And you cannot go extremely complex in an algorithm, because then it will be extremely complex to understand what it does. So I have this tendency to favor algorithms that are simple, and I still think that there are a lot of simple concepts to explore, especially with the amount of processing we have now available.
Any questions in the room? Because we are going to wrap up soon, so it'd be a great time for some Q&A. Yeah, and Niklas, thanks for putting up with my questions here.
So I have just a question about like product design. How does Softube go about deciding what products to make? Is that like something that comes directly from you, or is it through artist relations? Just how that process works.
We've been all over the place throughout the years. It was a very lust-driven approach for many, many years, which means that we have some products that we never released that we spent time on. But now, and it's still a lust-driven approach. Well, where do we want to go? What do we want to have? What do we feel is missing? But when we have a concept, we'd like to try that with some customers, maybe show them a sketch. What do you think about this? Or ask our big group of beta testers what they think. But at this point, it's a lot about, sort of filling holes, see where we want to go. And it's always a bigger picture that is not always accessible or can be seen from the user point of view. But okay, we want to go to this place because then we want to do this product, which means that we need to make these products in between. But I guess that in the past it was very lust driven, and in the beginning it was very tech driven. I would say that being too tech driven in product design is probably unfortunately a bad thing. We would have probably been in a better place if we listened to the needs and wants and the pain points of the users earlier on than just enjoying nice tech.
You got to take chances, though. There was another question. Yeah. Oh, in the mic though. Yep.
What's the average timeline from like product ideation to go into market?
Year maybe. The devs, the development time is usually 6 months, but then it could be a lot of time before that, just trying to figure out what we want to do or when we can do it, and then after the dev product's been developed, we need to find a slot to release it, and that could take another half year if we're unlucky. That's a good thing with being a smaller company in the beginning, was that we can come up with an idea, make the product, and release it. And it's like, oh shit, we forgot marketing or something like that. We don't do that anymore.
From the room, and then I'd like to move to some of the online questions. You've got some really good ones there as well, so please.
Aside from workflow optimization, what are a couple of great things you would like to see from your company or the industry in the near and far future?
It is about workflow things. How do you, I want to see product that enables people to make great music without being burdened by traditionalism. Because I think that the traditionalism of our business is what basically is preventing us from being as inclusive as we could be.
Thank you for that question. We'll move to some of the online questions here, Niklas. Here's one from Anonymous that says, how important is anti-piracy protection for you in terms of resource allocation, allocating resource on that instead of, say, R&D?
Extremely important. I mean, I don't know I don't know where we would have been if we wouldn't have used PACE from the start. But it has definitely been very important for us to always have basically protecting our customers' investment, making sure that they can that they want to invest in software products and that they know that we are defending their investment. So it's been important, and we spent a lot of time, especially in the early days, with that. But now it's more or less automated.
You didn't have to say that because I was asking the question. I mean, you know, and I wasn't anonymous. I'm just saying you didn't have to mention PACE. I mean, geez. Anyhow, we do have one last question from the Q&A, and please think if you have a last one here in the room. This one is from Farhan. It says, do you think there's still room for improvement on how good digital simulations of analog gear is? How close are we?
I would say that there's not much room for improvement, actually. Depends on the gear. Some gear could be extremely difficult. But most of the time, the trade-offs that we do is to make it take less CPU. But if we had more CPU, we could do less trade-offs. But the modeling is, I mean, analog gear isn't that difficult. At CERN, they can model how individual protons collide and exactly what happens. They are really good at modeling. What we do here is when we model audio gear is much simpler than that, but it works.
Thank you, Niklas. Let's see. Any last questions in the room? We're going to wrap up. We do have one last question from the room, Niklas. Thank you.
Thanks. For your current products, are you writing code that targets particular architectures like ARM or Intel, or are you just writing completely generic C++ and hoping the compiler will sort it out for you?
We make a mathematical model in our tool kit that was developed in a Scilab environment, and then we have a code generator that takes that mathematical model and converts it into code for a C code for a specific target. It could be an ARM or M1 or Cortex or even 56K, and then output specific code for that. And if we need to optimize something like a specific vector thing for a specific chip, we could do that in the code generator instead of doing it in the model that we're, the audio algorithm. We've separated those processes.
Is that code generator your own work? Or is
Yeah.
it something from Scilab? Ready? Nice.
Nice. That was a good last question. If there's not another question in the room, I think we will wrap. If there are questions you think of later, including for the online panels, I see that there were two similar questions that were already answered, but let's move those to the Discord. Niklas, I can send you a link to just grab onto the Discord channel if there's additional questions on this track.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for doing the Q&A. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you. I hope to see you in person soon.
Likewise, it was very nice. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely.